Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome to SmashUSMLE broadcast. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our broadcast today. And if you're already here, just send a message to our chat box. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. This is Dr. Adesina from SmashUSMLE Reviews. We shall be looking at the intensive mastery period using the study framework that we have created here at SmashUSMLE Reviews. So I will be going over some of the important things you need to know about the intensive mastery period, and we shall just begin. So as you can see here, we call it the pedal to the metal, and the ultimate goal is basically to optimize your study and productivity to maximize your score. And I have this fast and furious image here because when you study for the USMLE, it's basically got your foot on the pedal and you're on full throttle. So that's kind of like the analogy we like to use here at SmashUSMLE to describe this period when you're studying for the board exam. So what is the intensive mastery period? Well, this is a 6 weeks of full-time review, not the time you're actually learning things for the first time. Remember when you're studying for the USMLE, you have a finite time to review all the content you were taught in the first 2 years of medical school. If you're an international medical graduate, you are actually spending the 6 years in medical school, and eventually you plan to take the USMLE. Just a quick caveat, I just want to make sure everybody's here and they can hear me as we're kind of doing this presentation. If you can hear me, somebody can just say yes, and so I can just make sure everybody can hear through the microphone. I'm just kind of waiting for feedback here so that, okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Valentina, for that. So, so we can continue then. So, like I said, the intensive mastery period is basically the period where you have a short amount of time to be able to review for the USMLE. So now this is a very important caveat. During this time is not the time you try to learn and memorize everything in medicine. That's impossible because trying to learn every little detail is not productive. So don't try to learn as if you're learning all facts are created equal. They're actually not. So your goal for this time period is to focus on the big picture. I mean, like more high yield information that are actually clinically relevant. For example, it's more high yield for you to understand the pathogenesis of COPD, clinical signs and symptoms of COPD and how we treat patients with COPD, rather than just learning the low yield stuff like embryologic pharyngeal clefts or pouches in the embryologic section. Because those are low yield information you're probably going to forget. It's good if you know it, but it's not the most high yield information. So what's the definition of intensive mastery period? Well, this is a 6 weeks of full throttle review for the USMLE. And when you're actually studying this time period, you'll feel like you're the smartest person in the world because you're going to learn so much. However, it's also anxiety provoking. It comes with a lot of anxieties. And usually those anxieties come from two things. The first thing is you don't know exactly what to do if you're kind of figuring things out as you progress. And sometimes you have to basically try to make up a new plan. The second thing students run into is overthinking the process. Students are constantly resetting their plans or changing their plans every day. And you kind of end up wasting time because you don't have a good rigid structure. So now this is another thing you need to know. Start becoming comfortable with the idea that you don't need to memorize every single fact in the world of medicine to do well on this exam. You just need to be efficient in understanding the important clinical concepts, recognizing important concepts, and applying them to the questions that you're being tested on the board exam. And this is kind of how you get your 240s to 250s. Now, if you want to get above 250, then you have to go above and beyond to know more, or else you're going to just be overwhelmed with a lot of facts. So this is the most important slide of our webinar today. Okay, so we're going to go over this slideshow, and we're going to go over it in detail. So this is a schematic showing you your timeline, activities, and strategies during the intensive mastery period. So we recommend no more than 6 weeks because you will start to forget what you learned in the first week. So as you can see here, you have a timeline at the top here, the activities that you should be doing, and the strategy that you'll be implementing as you move along when studying for your board exam. And here we break it down into 6 weeks. Yeah, so the top here is week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and week 5 and 6. And we'll talk about each individual activity that you'll be doing in a minute and exactly what strategies. So this is just kind of give you a timeline. And at the end of 6 weeks, you take your board exam. So why do we recommend 6 weeks? Well, what happens is that when you're studying for the USMLE, you're learning a lot of information. And if you spend more than 6 weeks of high intense review, you start to burn out, because you start to forget what you learned in the first week, and it becomes a lot of diminishing returns whereby you just try to cram information out after 6 weeks and you're exhausted and fatigued, okay? So that's why we don't recommend no more than 6 weeks review. If you're an IMG, we recommend about 12 weeks for you to study for the USMLE because we know like every student has different deficiencies in different subject areas. So if you're coming from Ukraine or the Caribbean island or India, you might have to review all the content, especially if you've been in clinical practice in your country. You come to America and you have to learn all those basic knowledge and basic science knowledge again, which means it's going to take you some time to learn all the biochemistry and the genetics and the pathology that you've forgotten compared to the clinical contents that you know for step 2 CK, for example, step 3. And that's what makes step 1 different. So the first thing, though, is that you need to know yourself. So if you're a student who's deficient in a lot of areas, we want you to use the first month known as the pre-intensive mastery period. So we're not talking about the 6 weeks you're studying. So you spend the first month of which we call the pre-intensive mastery period to get a good grasp of the most subject areas to relearn what you've been taught in the first 2 years of medical school. So most students in the US usually take their USMLE around either June or July or basically the mid of May. So that's usually when most students study to take the exam. So which means we're talking about April, towards the end of your second year of medical school, you spend that last month, 1 month, kind of going over the concepts that you actually really don't understand when you're just memorizing the first 2 years of med school. So now let's take a look at week 1. So the first thing you have to do at the beginning of week 1 is you start with NBME 17, okay? Now, there's 3 NBMEs, there's 17, there's 18, and 19, but then or you can also do this computer clinical comprehensive-based self-assessment exam if your school already sponsors one. So there's some medical schools that offer you this, they call it an NBME practice test, or like a kind of like a pre-USMLE test exam that you take. And make sure you take that if the school offers it. Or if you don't, just take the NBME 17. And you probably wonder, why should I waste money, $60, go and pay for NBME 17, and I have not even studied anything? Exactly. That is the point. That is what makes this mastery period different. This study plan is what has been proven by Harvard medical students to work, and they use it all across the country. So you will want to purchase the one with the expanded feedback. That's what they even have by default right now. So why are you taking the NBME 17 is because you use it as a diagnostic tool to discover your weak subject areas. For example, you take NBME 17 and you'll find out that you're weak in biochemistry or cardiology. Also, it allows you to assess how you do with other students on the exam, because you get to see your score report and you see how far below you are to your target goal for your actual exam. The second thing is it serves as a prognostic indicator. it gives you a good indicator about your performance for the exam. So it's a great assessment of how you will perform when you complete your last NBME prior to taking the USMLE. So now, another thing you need to know is that in the first 2 years of medical school, you're going to be using the question bank to practice and learn the material for the first time. And you need to get familiar with how questions are written for the boards. So the style and the formatting of the USMLE is so unique because it's all integrated knowledge. So getting familiar with that is very, very critical. So the first thing we do here, as you can see, is we take the CBSSA 17 or the CSS A4. This is for step 2, okay? And once you do that, you basically know what your weak areas are, okay? So now we finally did activity number 1, and then you go to strategy. You want to plan your intensive master period schedule. So once you've completed that, the other thing we also recommend, actually, before we move forward, is that if you're a medical student in the United States, for example, we kind of hope you've already completed 50% of the QBank. That's why we have here at the bottom of the slide, completed 50% of the QBank. Well, because when you're in medical school in the first 2 years, usually at the beginning of your second year, we recommend that you start practicing questions. You know, at least start with 5 to 10 questions a day, beginning of your second year. Get used to understanding how these questions are written in the question bank. SmashUSMLE QBank has about 2,200 questions. You start working on these questions, and don't worry about what you're getting on the question bank. That is not what's important. What's important is actually understanding how the concepts are tested and getting them wrong and understanding the explanation. So we expect you to have completed about 50% by the time you hit about May, when you're about to hit the full throttle. So at that point in time, we want you to reset the QBank, okay? So once you reset the QBank, and if you haven't even done 25%, let's say you start in January and you've already started doing questions in January and you've only done maybe 25 or 30 or 40%, it's okay. At least you've seen most of the questions for the first time. And a lot of the questions are kind of redundant, kind of testing the same concept in different angles anyway. So it's okay to reset your QBank. And then we go to the intensive mastery period, right? After the first day, you plan based on your weak areas, and after you finish your NBME 17, and you start to review the subject or topics using the SmashUSMLE videos. So we teach our students in our program that, yes, we have covered about 90% of all the high yield topics from first aid, and also for your step 2 review also. However, you don't have to watch every single video, except let's say you're an IMG coming to the US and you don't understand a lot of the topics and you have to kind of go over all the topics all over again. Then you go ahead and you review all the videos because you probably don't remember a lot of the stuff. But if you're US grad, then that's okay. You kind of select topics based on the videos, based on the topics that you are weak on. And that's how you go about doing your intensive mastery schedule. And then you kind of finished week 2, okay? So, and also we recommend once you're studying, right? So you want to be doing 1 to 2 Q blocks daily. So let's say you're studying, you find out that you're weak in biochemistry, right? And when you actually start doing practice questions, you study biochemistry during the course of the day. In the evening, then work on doing 80 questions or 90 questions. And when you do that, you actually focus just on biochemistry. And you want to even be super specific. Let's say it's the cardiovascular system part of biochemistry that you don't understand. Then you want to focus on those aspects. So on a SmashUSMLE review, you go to our website, you can actually click and select a specific subsection of each subject that you are actually deficient in, okay? So you do this for the first 2 weeks, okay? And then you take, before the beginning of week 3, you take about 1 to 2 hours, about a week to kind of do some pre-NBME review. What does that mean? Well, let's say you're going to take your second NBME exam, which is the CBSSA 18. And if it's for step 2 CK, it will be CCSSA. Remember, CBSSA means Comprehensive Basic Science Self-Assessment Test. And this is Comprehensive Clinical Self-Assessment Test number 6. Okay? So when you take the second one, before you take it, go over some of the topics that you may not have started reading yet. So that's a good time maybe to review a quick biostatistics the day before you take your second NBME test assessment test. This to give you an idea, so that you don't drop the ball and you don't score really low on some of these sections. A couple hours just to review that. And once you take the second NBME, you're going to get your score back. And you're going to see all your weak areas highlighted big and bold. Remember, it's all about working on your weak sections because that's where your lowest hanging fruit is. So, once you identify your weak areas, you re-strategize your schedule based on your weak areas again. Let's say you have moved, let's say pulmonary to the fourth week. That's when you're going to study pulmonary. But then at the beginning of third week, you realize, wait a minute, I scored pretty bad on pulmonary. I need to start on pulmonary right away. You move that pulmonary section and move it forward to the beginning of week 3, and you start working on that because just focusing on those weak areas can get you easy 5 to 10 points extra, even a day of just putting those work into your weak sections. Okay, so and then we move on to week 4. All right, where you keep studying again based on your weak areas, and now you start reviewing your subjects and your topics using the SmashUSMLE videos. And by the end of week 4, the beginning of week 5, then you take another NBME, which is your last NBME 19. At this point, either between you can take it the end of week 5 or to beginning of week 6. Whichever one is gonna be. This is gonna be your last NBME. So I think what I suggest is a week before your exam, you should take the last NBME because a week before the test, you should have pretty much mastered most of the content that you need to know by then. And remember, you've been studying for 5.5 weeks, so you pretty much have a few days before the real exam. So at that point, you take it, and let's say you started as 195 on CBSSA 17. We are hoping by the time you get to taking the second NBME, you've gone to maybe about 210, 220. And then you take the NBME 19, you're hitting about 230, 240. If you're hitting that number, 242, 243, 235, you're ready to take the test. Basically, that's a good sign that you working on your weak sections have already paid off, right? You're getting extra points and you're working on those low-hanging fruit. So once you take the the NBME 19 and you get a high score, you should be good to go. Now, this is a caveat. I meet students all the time and they take their NBME or CBSSA before maybe 3 days before the exam or 5 days before the exam. And let's say the score 199. And they're like, oh, wow, I did pretty okay. I passed the test. Now, that's not a good indicator because on the actual exam, your score is going to fluctuate based on plus or minus 12 points. Okay. Now, most of the time, you're going to score slightly lower or higher on the actual exam. So let's say a student is scoring let's say 200. Okay, let's take 200 for example. When he takes the exam, if he's scoring 200 on this last NBME and he goes ahead and takes it, he's probably going to score between 195 plus or minus maybe 205. Okay, now you're taking a chance because let's say you're an IMG or even a US grad and you wanted to match it to radiology or or emergency medicine or OB. Think about the specialty you're going to be going into. If you're going to family medicine and you really don't care much, which you should, if you pass the board exam and you're a US graduate, you're matching to residency. Family medicine is not competitive. But if you're going through the E-roads, which is E-roads stands for emergency medicine, radiology, ophthalmology, anesthesia, dermatology, and S stands for surgical specialties, which is urology, general surgery, okay, ENT, all those surgical specialties. They're very competitive. So your score's got to be high, and you're competing against people who are scoring in the 230s and above, or at least 220s and above. And the average score in step 1 right now is 228. On step 2 CK is 240. If you're at IMG, I tell all IMG students, do not look at those numbers you see on the NBME website as your number. Okay, because this is a 3-tier process. The allopathic MD students are ranked first and they must match. And the osteopathic medical students are ranked next if they try to go into an allopathic program. And then the IMGs are ranked last. So even for a program director to look at your applications, they use the USMLE to screen people out. That's why a lot of IMG students apply to 100 programs and get maybe 5 or 4 interviews, right? Except you actually go to a program where that they know you personally, and then they will probably just interview you anyway, whether you have a high board scores or not. Now, whether they pick you or not, it's up to the program. So I tell, whether you're a US grad or an IMG student, I basically recommend that shoot for as high as you could possibly can. Okay. Now, if you want to go into pediatrics and you score 205, you're going to match, right? But what about if you shoot high enough or a high enough board score? So when you take your NBME 19, your score gives you a chance to be able to get multiple interviews, which means the more interviews you get, the more chances of you be able to match and pick a program you actually want to go to. So that's just a little caveat. We'll talk about that in another day. Okay. But after you take your NBME, the next thing is review and attack weak areas. Okay. That's the ultimate goal. All right. Now, by the time you hit the beginning of week 5, you should have completed about 2,200 questions, and you should have annotated in your first aid. Okay. So when we said review weak subject topics with SmashUSMLE videos, it means as you're doing your questions, just 1 to 2 Q banks daily, you're annotating your first aid and filling in the information. And the goal is you should have read through your first aid at least twice, a minimum of twice before you even take the board exam. If you can read it 3 times for the last review, that will be awesome. Okay. This is why this slide is the most important. This is why we call the intense mastery period. You're mastering high-yield concepts that are relevant for the board exam. Okay. So now, let's look at your schedule. So this is just a sample schedule, okay? Not everybody's schedule needs to look exactly like this. It's just a schematic representation. You can create the schedule based on your own availability and what you do. So this is just to give you an example. But the most important thing you need to know about your schedule is you want to plan your day to meet when you plan to take the exam. What does that mean? So when we tell you to take that CBSSA exam, let's say you schedule exam for 9 a.m. in the morning to take your actual USMLE. Well, when you're taking your practice test, you should be taking it at 9 a.m. in the morning. Why? It's to simulate that exam mode, so that if you're scheduled to take your exam in the morning, don't take your practice test in the evening, because that doesn't match that time frame. Okay, so make sure you do that. Okay, so you're simulating that environment. It's and so that when you actually take the exam, you kind of feel the same thing. So let's take a look at this board schedule. The first thing when you plan your intensive mastery board schedule is that during this time, first of all, pick up the phone, call your dad, call your mom, call your friends, and tell them, I'm sorry, guys, I am in board mode. I am not going to be available for the next 6 weeks. If you need to reach me, just leave a message. I'll get back to you. Okay, you're not abandoning your family, but this is the most critical point of your life. Okay, you only get to take the USMLE once. Once you pass it, that's it. You can never retake the test. Okay, and if your score is low, your chance of matching to residency is lower. Okay, so you need to take this like your life depends on it. Okay, another caveat that you need to know about when you study for the boards, you will be tired no matter what you do. Even the top-notch gunner medical students, they are exhausted. Okay, so now that's why we create this schedule in a block format. So pick a block. So there's block 1, block 2, block 3, and block 4. And it's basically an 8 a.m. schedule all the way to 11 p.m. in the evening. So the way we create it is basically 1 hour increments, right? 8 to 9 a.m., you put your study time. Then 9 to 10, study. You do that till 12 p.m. But wait a minute. You can't be studying 4 hours straight. That is insane. Don't do that. Study in 45 minutes to 50 minutes increments of time, okay? Take 10 to 15-minute break per hour. I'm going to repeat that again. You must take 10 to 15 minutes for every hour that you study, because you do not want to burn out, guys. This is very, very crucial. So it's basically 45 minutes block, or it's 50 minutes, and you time yourself, and when your alarm goes off, you stop, you get up, you walk away out of the library or wherever you are, go take a break, and come back in 10 minutes. Okay, you do that, and then during lunchtime, you exercise. Guys, this is a marathon. This is a marathon. You got to exercise. You don't want to be reading about diabetes and hypertension and hypercholesterolemia, about patients that have a sedentary lifestyle while you're sitting there studying long hours and you're not doing the same, okay? Exercise is good for your brain, increases blood flow to your heart, right? And basically enhances your brain activity. So exercise, even if only for 20, 30 minutes, that's good, okay? Eat, take a little light walk. You know, you don't have to go to the gym and do some crazy workout if you don't have to, just so you don't get exhausted. But walk, take a run, okay? And drink a lot of fluids. And then you start with second block. Do the same thing just like block one, and then take breaks. You have to take break, guys. And then dinner, 5 to 6 p.m. Why, you know, you can be listening to like a little video even while you're eating dinner, or you can be listening to an audio. Whatever you do, exercise, incorporate exercise, go for a walk in the evening, get some fresh air, okay? And eat good food. Don't eat junk food, okay? When you're studying, your brain needs a lot of glucose. Eat food that's nourishing to your body, fruits, vegetables, okay? So that you're in optimum condition when you're studying for the boards. If you eat junk food, you're gonna have this high sugar rush, okay? And then you're gonna crash when your insulin goes in, and basically you're gonna start sleeping while you're studying, okay? All right, and if you gotta take a nap, right? Dinner time, maybe eat, you wanna take a 10-minute nap, a 15, 20-minute nap, it's okay. That is fine. You can also incorporate flashcards into this section. We have flashcards on our website. You can go through it on the app. You can do that. It's up to you. Now, block 3 is 6 to 11. You got about 5 hours to do question bank and review your question banks, okay? So at 11, we recommend you go to sleep, okay? No more 11 p.m., you're done, you're exhausted, go to sleep. All right, so, and also, the goal is for you to be able to sleep about 8 hours a day. Just give me 1 second. So you want to be getting at least 8 hours of sleep a day. And that's very, very critical, because if you're not sleeping, you're going to be exhausted the next day. And it's just not good for your body, because you're going through a high intense review. So that's critical, guys. So let's look at the NBME test strategy. So what is the NBME test practice test strategy? Well, this is the NBME's best kept secret, okay? The NBME doesn't tell you this, but this is their top secret, is this score report that you get every time you take their assessment test. So let's take a look here. A student takes the NBME practice test, right? That's a CBSSA, and score of 450, right? And then you get this graph. It's like a performance graph. And what you notice on this graph is this. There's lower performance here, borderline performance, and higher performance. And there's this borderline shaded section here, all right? And on the left side, they show you all the different disciplines. This is what they want you to be competent in when you are a physician and a medical student studying for step 1 or step 2 or step 3, okay? Now, what I want you to pay attention is the red block area, okay? So from this line, from the borderline section to the left side is the lower performance section, okay? And anything to the right here means you're doing super high and you're basically mastered those information, okay? Now, the shorter the bar to the right it is, the more mastery you've had of the knowledge, okay? Now, if you look here, we've kind of arranged what your score kind of falls into. If you're in the borderline, you're gonna pass the test. They want you to, if they tell you the passing score is 192 or 198, what they're telling you is that you're borderline understanding of all the clinical concepts they want you to know for the board exam. So here you see 190 to 210, right? But as you go further, look, 210 to 235 gets you around here, almost halfway through this section. And people scoring 235 to 260, their graph, which is these blue bars, are way out to the right. And obviously people are scoring 260 plus are the ones that are going all the way to the right, okay? So you want to get as much of these bars to the right as possible. So when you take your NBME, the first thing you look at is look at all these blue bars that fall past the borderline, okay? And before the borderline, I mean. And that's your weak areas. That is what we talk about, the weak areas. So when you take it, you're like, okay, I'm weak in physician tax diagnosis. I'm sorry, here is principle and management. Also behavioral sciences, I'm weak in gross anatomy and embryology, and I'm also weak in the cardiovascular system. Those are my weakest areas, all right, because I'm below the borderline. So what do I do next? Well, I'm gonna transfer that and look at this detailed analysis of the content. So what you do is basically you compare side to side and say, oh, look at that. On behavioral sciences, I got 4 questions wrong. That's not good. And on gross anatomy and embryology, I got 4 questions wrong, right? So that is how you identify your weak areas. Once you've identified them, you translocate that and say, okay, now I've identified, now I need to master the concepts on my weak areas by using the SmashUSMLE review to be able to find out what I need to work on and basically combine my first aid to be able to master the content. And you do this over as you go along and you're studying for the board exam, okay? This is what we call the NBME practice strategy, and this is what really works, okay? Get the lowest hanging fruit. So let's take a look at the timeline for US grads, right? So we said the pre-IMP, which is intensive master period, it's usually the first 2 years. Sometimes some students, you know, for example, at Harvard, they only do 1 year of basic science and they do research, or Duke. So, well, either way, whether it's the first year or the first 2 years, you want to focus on high-yield clinical concepts, right? Remember, you study 5 to 10 questions a day to learn the concept from the book using videos and Q-banks. Concepts always trump factoids. Remember, you will forget the low-yield materials. It's guaranteed. You will forget them because they don't stick. But if you understand the overall arch and the overall theme of the of each disease, you will be able to understand how the question writers are testing on it. Now, by the intensive mastery period, you have to finish 50% of the Q-bank by then, or even 25% that you've annotated in your first aid, like the presentation of diseases, pathogenesis of diseases, diagnosis and management of most diseases. And during the intensive master period, then you reset your question bank, and then you finish the Q-bank completely. Some students don't do that. Don't take your USMLE exam without finishing the Q-bank, okay? Because this is the time you have a full-time review of the exam, and always use the NBME practice strategy. So typically you start September to December M2, in January to April, the pre-intensive mastery period. By April to June is the intensive mastery period, and May to June you take your USMLE. How about the timeline for the IMGs? Well, this is a 12-week period we recommend for you guys. So you want to complete the preclinical 4 to 5 semesters of medical school, obviously. And then, you know, if you finish your medical school and then you want to take the USMLE exam. So we recommend at least 4 to 6 weeks of review. And what do? Well, you watch SmashUSMLE review lectures to master and understand how the USMLE is being tested. And then you read the other recommended USMLE books for refresher. So we have recommended books that we, you know, select that have been rated in the top rated books used by medical students in the US. Those are the books you should be focusing on and to use to understand and refresh your memory. And then you move into the intensive mastery period, which is basically your 6 weeks intense review. And then you take the USMLE. So here's some of the resources. SmashUSMLE review, we have question banks, videos, and flashcards. First aid for the USMLE Step 1, 2018 edition is actually coming out in December. And then you have the Yale G first aid, which we shall be talking about in a minute. Crush USMLE Step 2, CK, and Step 3. This is the latest book that's finally out now. It's been around for 3 or 4 years now. We are official partners with the author. He's one of the contributing authors to our company. And the book is basically the best high-yield book currently for Step 2 CK, compared to Master the Boards or, you know, First Aid. And I'll tell you what the book is all about in a minute. And then also your NBME. So it's going to cost you under $180 to take these 3 tests. They're $60 each. They are worth it. It's not worth getting a bootleg version of this online that people have because you're not going to get your score report. So a lot of students try to take corners by like either downloading a free copy on the internet. What happens is that you don't get your profile when you actually a score report, a performance profile. So how are you going to know what you're weak on, and how are you going to be able to implement in the NBME practice test strategy that we recommend? So please just buy it. It's worth the investment. So we have a special offer for you today for 10% off, and we're going to be activating the discount code on our USMLE test review. And also, we have this free book. So let me tell you about the Yale G First Aid book. So Dr. Yale is actually a neurologist at the University of Pennsylvania. And he wrote this book with Dr. Warner and Dr. Magdaleni from Harvard. And basically what they did is they put Master the Boards, UWorld, Up to Date, and all these step 2 resources all together in one book. Because over the years, students have complained that there's no one book that's good for step 2, right? So what they did is basically they put together all this resource for you into one book and everything basically you need to know for step 2 CK. All right. And the book is super awesome. It's got about 4.5 stars on Amazon already. That means one of the #1 selling books for step 2. Even if a lot of people still complain about Master the Boards because it's missing some of the content. This book has everything in it. It's almost 600 pages long, and it's got good pictures and basically summarizes everything you need. It's 720 pages long, I meant to say. It's got everything you need to know. We are partners with the author, and he's part of our company. We offer this book for free. It's $34.95. You have to buy the book online. But if you subscribe to our Step 2 CK program, we actually mail you a free copy of this book. So, if this is the first time you're hearing about this, you want to take advantage of this limited offer while it lasts. So we're going to take some questions from everybody right now. And I'm just going to go back to this slide here. And then if you guys have any questions, please feel free to send your questions here. I'm available. So the discount code is available below. It's USMLE 10. It gives you 10% off any of our USMLE Step 2 and Step 1 program to have access to it. So you can use the code and you can also share with your friends. So we have a question here. What's the difference between SmashUSMLE QBank versus UWorld's QBank and even Kaplan? So the difference between our question bank is that, and UWorld QBank is, the question is actually written by MDs and MD PhDs, and we follow first aid very, very closely. The difficulty level is pretty much similar between us and UWorld. A lot of students use UWorld. I don't know much about Kaplan question banks, but we recommend students to use UWorld because we know you're going to purchase UWorld anyway in our program because you've probably heard about UWorld before anyway. So we still recommend you use UWorld. But specifically for our program, we have the SmashUSMLE QBank, which has about 2,200 questions, and to be able to allow you to study for the USMLE. But you'll see, it's pretty much similar difficulty, just like UWorld QBank, and it basically helps you reinforce and resolidify some of the topics that you don't know on the board exam. So I have another question here from Tiffany. How do I arrange my topics? Do I read first aid front to back or in a different order? So the way you arrange your topic is based on your schedule. So that's why we talk about that intensive mastery period schedule. So you don't want to start reading from behavioral science all the way to pulmonology in first aid. So what you want to do is, let's say you're weak in neurology. You're going to start with neurology, and let's say you put 3 days to study for neurology. You basically go into your first aid and start reading that section of first aid in that order. So if you have pulmonary, path, cardio, pharm, in that order, that is the order. You read based on your weak areas, not basically reading from the beginning to the end. I hope that answers your question, Tiffany. Does anybody has any other questions? Okay, guys, if anybody doesn't have any more questions, so somebody said, what about staying on track? Can you clarify what you mean by staying on track? So basically, if you're, what we recommend is that you can take one day off, in between your studying, like in a week, if you have to. But it's probably not a good idea if you're taking breaks for 2 to 3 days, if this is during your intensive mastery period, because, you want to continuously build up on your knowledge base. And if you take an extended period off, okay, so how do you force yourself to get back on track? Okay, now, except you have ADHD or some underlying medical condition, it's hard. It's hard. But, you kind of just have to be very disciplined. Remember, like, there's so many people studying for this board exam, and you're not the only one. And the discipline is the most important thing there. Turn off your phones, get off the internet, get off Facebook, shut down your accounts, basically get rid of distractors in your life, because you can't just be taking 2 to 3 days off and they kind of expect to be in the intensive mastery mode. And I think a lot of times when people are getting distracted is because there's just so many distractions: TV, Netflix, and video games, and friends, families, and you're probably in the wrong environment. You need to wake up in the morning, get your breakfast ready, leave your house if you don't if you have to, if people are in your house that are distracting you, then they're wasting your time. Get out and go to the library where you see people more focused, and then basically sit tight and basically sit there and get this done. Because you hurt yourself, you don't hurt anybody else. So that's how you stay on track. Just get rid of all the distractors and kind of be 120% focused on it. But if you're tired and exhausted, take one day off. That's okay. Like, a day off is not going to hurt you. But I wouldn't recommend taking 2 to 3 days off, except you're doing something other than studying. That's actually taking a lot of your time. But if this is during the pre-intensive master period, let's say you're an IMG and you're working on research or something like that, then that's okay. Like, you're watching videos, you're just catching up on content. You can kind of spread things out a little bit. But after that period, you got to stop and just focus for 6 weeks straight. That's it. So that's what I strongly recommend that you do. We have another question here. What about the format of SmashUSMLE video? Do I arrange them to suit myself? So yes. So you remember when you create your schedule, the way you create them is basically how you also follow the videos too. So we're actually coming out with a new schedule for a 6 weeks intensive program that's going to incorporate all the SmashUSMLE videos in each block, and that we're working on. It should be coming out by next week, and then you'll be able to see a sample. But you're still going to have to create your own version of it. But that's kind of how you do things also. So let's say you decide to study cardiovascular system, right? Basically, the way you do is you create 3 days for cardio, because cardio is a big. There's 4 big topics. There's cardio, pulm, GI, and neuro. So this takes about 3 days, and micro. So you create 3 days, and you say those 2 blocks that we've talked about, you fill in the video topics that you're weak on, and you plug them into those. So you're gonna be watching those videos. Remember, you can speed up the videos up to 2 times the speed. So a 10-minute video should take you 5 minutes or 7 minutes. And that's how you kind of arrange it to suit yourself when you're using SmashUSMLE videos, Tiffany. Anyone have any other questions? So if you need to reach me or you have any questions, you can send an email to admin@smashusmle.com. That's our email address. If you have any questions regarding board-related issues, creating a schedule, having to talk to an advisor, or if you subscribe to our program, you have access to our doctors. So like, feel free to be able to shoot us an email. You have any feedback to our program, anything you would like to see that's different. We have like flashcards, we have question bank videos, we have audiobooks. So we try to make it as comprehensive, but we always try to improve ourselves in terms of bringing you the best resource and giving you things that are high yield. So if you have any suggestions, we are always here. Send us an email. Our customer service department will get back to you within 24 hours, and then we'll take care of anything that you need. Okay, guys, if we don't have any more questions, thank you everybody for coming to the webinar today. We really appreciate it. We'll have another webinar coming up in the next 2 weeks or so. Just look out in your email, and don't forget to share the word with your friends and let them know about our webinars. Let them know that we're here for you. SmashUSMLE Review has been around for 7 years, and we've been helping students pass and do well in the USMLE. We have a high success rate here at SmashUSMLE. And we're really invested in our students, and we really care about your success. We want you to match into residency and be the best doctor you can possibly be. And that's our mission here. And we want you to, ultimately reach your goal. And we hope we are here to be the right resource for you. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Spread the word. Tell your friends and colleagues in other medical schools. Invite them also to our webinars. And we'll be bringing other speakers soon also to talk to you. If you have any suggestions to any particular topic you want to hear about, shoot us an email, and we're more than happy to let you know. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.